This room we're in now up here, was this the old general science room, or do you remember, or do you know?
I don't know in your time. It was a counselor's office when I was in school.
Well,
Right
it was.
here. Yeah. Okay. Hey, we're back today. Marshfield Old School Times. I'm Lyndall Fraker. We've got a special guest with us today, Mr. Philip Ragsdale. Philip, welcome.
Well, glad to be here, Lyndall. I'm glad I'm able to get up and around
That's right.
at my age and can be here.
Well, we appreciate it. We know you've got a lot of information up there in that brain of yours, and we're going to try to squeeze a little of it out,
A lot
out
of
of you.
it, a lot of it is worth nothing.
Well, I don't know about that. I think a lot of people will enjoy our hour together today. So we're going to try to keep on track here with Philip. Time's going to go by really fast. I've already heard lots of stories in the last 15 or 20 minutes, so we're going to have a lot of fun. So Philip Ragsdale, gosh, lived on Farmland Road for how many years now?
Been there since '59.
Since 1959.
My wife and I, we bought 3 acres of land there from Uncle Cale Roast, her uncle. Dave Roast, his brother, run Roast Lumber Company.
My grandpa.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And we built a house there, and we've added on to it since then, and we bought more land since then. But I'm still there. My wife's no longer with me. It's been 5 years since she passed away. We were married 62 years.
62. That's amazing.
And she, part of this was land where we're at now was the old Charlie Towers, his property. And some of us might remember Charlie Towers, might not. He's been gone several years.
Buddy Towers' dad, wasn't he?
Buddy Towers, his dad, yeah.
I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to back up just a little bit. We're going to go back even further. Let's go back to 1938. 1938 out here south of Marshfield. And let's start there, okay?
That's where I was born at, south of Marshfield, 1938, on the farm out there. And that's where I raised up at. I stayed there until I got married, till Edwin and I got married in 1958.
And your folks were?
Charlie and Hattie Ragsdale.
Okay.
Mom her maiden name was Renner, from all the Renners over south towards Fordland.
And this farm was where now, out south?
It's off of Hardwood Road now is where it's at. It's where Don Replogle lives on Hardwood Road, and Mount Sinai Church out there. It's down south of there, just a little while. It's right on top of the hill where the old Replogle place is, down at the bottom of the hill. If you get to the Munson Hill on A Highway, still when you're going A Highway heading towards 60, when you drop off before you get to the James River quite a ways back this side, there's a pretty good sized hill right there. You drop off, that's the Munson Hill. Raleigh Munson and all lived there in my day and time, and that's where I met the school bus at to ride to Marshfield High School.
So that was what? How many? That's a mile or better, wasn't it, to walk to get the
about
bus?
about a mile, cutting across through the country.
So you cut through the country. Okay, now you got to visualize too. A Highway wasn't really quite like it is now, right? I mean, Hardwood Road was what kind of the old Fordland Road, right?
That's right. Well, Elm Street.
Elm Street, yeah.
Elm Street was the old, back then we called it the Fordland Road a lot of times. And A Highway was still gravel.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what year they blacktopped it, but it had been after that sometime. And but I met the school bus over there at A Highway. And,
so Elm Street kind of run into what is now A, of course, but then that was all Fordland Road.
And the old Fordland Road went on down by Bell Ford, across the James River there, and then it went on out south there to where it comes out on F Highway.
So things were a little different. A Highway was gravel, like you said, most of it.
But it basically followed the same path of where it is now, except when you drop off the hill there before you get to the old Munson Hill, it had this low water crossing down there that across the creeks there, and a lot of times in high waters, you could not afford
Couldn't cross it.
Yeah. Right. I run into that one night on a case of trouble. I forgot about it. Well, it's one I didn't wreck a co-op trip. I did drown it out.
We're going to hear lots of co-op stories here in a minute.
Anyway,
so you had three brothers?
Had 3 brothers.
Okay.
Clarence, Gene, and Cecil.
Clarence, Gene, and Cecil, and they all were around here. A lot of people remember Cecil.
They're all gone.
And Gene
Gene worked for the county and
Uh-huh.
Marshfield Machinery.
Then hung out. I know he hung out at Sheila's a lot in the day there, and
Still do.
yeah, and Cecil, of course, had the engine service,
Right.
chainsaw shop.
Cecil was a little, he wouldn't spend more money for a cup of coffee. He was pretty, Cecil passed away last year, and he was a good brother.
Yeah.
And but anyway,
And then was Clarence the oldest?
Clarence was the oldest. Clarence passed away in 82, I believe it was,
Yeah.
cancer. And then Gene passed away in 87. I believe that's right. Just trying to go from memory.
Sure, sure.
But anyway, Gene was a mechanic, and he was a good one. If it had something to do with an Alice Chandler tractor, he knew about it and knew what to fix it.
Yeah. So growing up out there, you walked about maybe a mile or whatever to get on this bus to go to school. What else did you boys all do?
Well, rabbit hunted,
rabbit hunt. Mm-hmm.
rabbit hunted and squirrel hunted.
Uh-huh.
And I had an old collie dog. I was too young to carry a gun. Folks wouldn't let me take a gun with me to carry it. But old Ring, an old collie dog I had, he knew that if he treated a squirrel and I could find him and I'd tell him to stay there, he'd stay there till I went to the house and got the gun. Folks let me take the gun. Of course, if we eat this squirrel, that was a good young squirrel was a delicacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that old dog would stay there faithfully at the base of that tree and till I got back. And
Well,
but
dogs like that are just, boy, they're valuable, aren't they, as a kid?
he was my buddy all the time.
Right, right. So you come to Marshfield. No, you went to, what school did you attend? Elementary?
Well, grade school. I went to Oak Hill School.
Oak Hill, and it was on Farmland Road.
Yes, it's on Farmland Road, and the schoolhouse been converted into a residential home now.
Lois and Gary Turner live there, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
The Walter Brixey place.
Yeah. And and I walked to school there. That was about a mile walk too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dad would take me sometimes if the weather was bad. But hey, we didn't have a lot of transportation back then.
Yeah.
I can remember back in, well, when I was just growing up, and I was just too young to remember much of it, but rationing times in World War II, you didn't have everything that you wanted back then.
Right.
Tars was rationed,
mm-hmm.
and so was gasoline. Sugar was a big item,
mm-hmm. And they had scrap metal drives.
Scrap metal drives. Oh yeah, I can remember. And they'd pick up the scrap metal people coming through the country, driving the old county roads, driving real slow and looking in the ditches and see if they find anything. Of course, they were not really making money on it. These articles, the old scrap metal was going into the war effort. It was going into, I guess, to make equipment for the soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever.
Recycle or whatever.
Yeah.
Well,
but times was how hard then.
We had Tom Farr Jr. on several months ago, and he mentioned that they had during those scrap metal drives, they would have a big pile on the square, and people would bring their metal up there and dump it on the pile, and then there were soldiers that came up from Fort Wood, and they would load that up periodically and haul it back to wherever they took it, and that was all part of your patriotic duty in those days,
Well, then later on, and this has been in your time, probably, Lyndall, they were after the World War II, and they were trying to get Japan on a stable footing. And one of the comments used to be that something that, of course, they were importing, the United States was importing made material from Japan. And you get a medal in it, something metal. They said, well, look on that and see if it's still got prints from the USA still on it somewhere.
I remember that. Actually, as a kid, the stuff we would get, even at maybe Mary's Variety or something like that, it would say made in Japan on it. And that word today, it says made in China, right?
Right.
But back then, it was really important as the United States helped build back
Japan.
They
were helping build back.
We occupied it, and of course that was important to keep those people busy and get them back to work and rebuild their factories, and so that merchandise was shipped over here and became goods that we purchased. But, well, so you went to 8 grades at Oak Hill, and then
I came to Marshfield.
This building right here.
This building right here, and I remember a lot of the old building here and the gym. They were just building a gym. Of course, coming from the country, I'd never played basketball, and you didn't have much sports out there. We had baseball or softball, that is, at school, and we'd play, but not competitive like you did in the city schools. But they were just building the new gym here that's on the west side of the old building here. At that time, it was kind of what we'd call a state of the art gym. That was the first time I'd ever seen glass backboards. And the way they crank up and down now, let them down, and or to crank them up to get them out of the way now. If I remember correctly, Walter Atkinson, who owned the pump service here in Marshfield, the well service, Walter was quite an engineer, and he designed those backboards, if I remember correctly.
That's interesting because before we came up here to do this today, I had to go down to the gym. We had a gym party, and the goals had been raised up because there's churches that use the gym and they want that goal in front of the stage raised up, for good vision. Right. And so I had to crank that goal down before the party came in. The people came in to play, and it was interesting that I just done that and came up here, and then you were telling me about that, and so here that mechanism that works the crank, 70 years old this year, and it still works great. And I know
he was quite an engineer.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I had not ever heard that. That's an interesting story.
He and his wife, they built a new home out here across from Walmart on the north side of 38 there. And one of the first homes, this is the reason I remember this, it was electrically heated. They had water, like I said, was had a pump service here, a well service here in Marshfield in Webster County. And he put water lines all in it was hot water heat under the floors in that house. Took a 37.5 kVA transformer to supply power to that. And the reason why I remember that so well because I hung that transformer on the pole out there myself.
Yeah, that was a state of the art. That was new technology, wasn't it?
It was new technology. Yeah. It had a big boiler in the garage.
Isn't that something?
With circulating the water through, and it circulated through that house through the piping under the floor.
Would that have been in the 50s?
That'd have been in the early 60s.
Early 60s, yeah.
Early 60s.
Yeah. So you went to high school. You played. Now I've heard a lot of stories. I've got uncles that all were about your age. Bob Roast, E.L. Roast, and of course Uncle Donald, John Krieger, Joe Paul Clare. All my uncles. Most of those boys were pretty good basketball players. I think you were a pretty good basketball player, weren't you?
Well, I could not grip the ball like a lot of them. I could jump.
But you were tall, and
I could jump with any of them. The goal was 10 feet up. That was the height of the goal from the floor. I could put a good 8-10 inches of my arm up or a hand up over that goal, just standing there flat-footed and jump it. But I could never grip the ball good enough. My hand wasn't big enough to dunk it.
Yeah.
But I could never dribble a ball or some flitter. It'd get away from me.
Yeah.
But I could jump with any of them.
Right. Did you ever get to play in the new gym then though?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So because I think the date plate in the hallway says 1954. I don't know if that's when they started it or that's when they cut the ribbon, but one of the two. So you would have got to play. You graduated.
I played it. We practiced.
Yeah.
Ralph Marler was our coach, and we practiced our basketball either in Stratford or Elkland. But boy, they got this gym where we could play.
That's probably when you were like a freshman or sophomore, maybe.
I was a freshman.
Yeah. Because by the time you became an upperclassman, it was all going good then.
Yeah, it was done.
You graduated in 56.
I graduated in 56. Okay. That's right.
All right. Well, now tell us about Edwina. When did you meet Edwina and all that?
Well, of course, I knew her from as far as I can remember, because we were neighbors, you might say. And then on her 16th birthday, Joanne George, it is now, and a group of us got together. We said we'd have a birthday party for her, and they said, "Well, you get her away from the house." So I asked her out for a date. So we just went out and drove around through the country right there to give them time to get back to the house and get everything decorated like I want to. So that's when we started dating, when she was 16.
I see. And how old were you?
I'm 86 now.
How old were you then? I mean,
At that time, I'd have been about 18.
about 2 years older.
I'd been, yeah, probably 17.
17.
I
Okay.
wasn't over 18, I know, because I went to work at the co-op when I was Webster Electric when I was 18.
18. What year was that?
That'd have been in 58.
58. And you graduated in 56. So
Uh-huh.
did you ever do anything else in between there? Or did you go
I,
straight to the co-op?
The first summer that after I got out of school, I worked for Alfred and Jess Graves on
Mm-hmm.
a Marshfield burial service.
Mm-hmm.
Made funeral sets
Mm-hmm.
all over the county. Well, and all over southwest Missouri, I guess you might say.
Mm-hmm.
We'd go clear down to Manus, Mountain Grove, and
I didn't know that. That's news.
and I would
Yeah.
we'd had we poured concrete vaults, made them down here in a little plant down here on 3rd Street.
Okay.
And Jesse Graves, that was Alfred's brother,
Mm-hmm.
and I and Bill Blazer,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd pour that concrete in those vault forms and mix those vaults, put reinforcing bar in there and all for it, and then we'd paint those vaults, and then they'd sell them. They had a funeral home at Mountain Grove,
Mm-hmm.
Barbara Evers, and then the one at Seymour and Simpson seemed like it was one at Hartville, and then the one here at Marshfield,
Mm-hmm.
and Joe Arthur and Oral Edwards, I remember very well.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd go set the tents up and get this all set up where we'd make a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hmm.
I done that.
They dug the grave and the whole deal.
Well, sometimes we dug a grave by hand.
Is that right?
Jesse and I could dig a grave. If it was fairly decent digging, we could dig a grave in 2.5, 3 hours.
Really?
But by hand.
Wow.
We had a kind of a system worked up. One of us do the picking, one of us do the shoveling. So we do and we'd mark that all out, and we'd go 4 foot deep with it.
Yeah.
And that's always required. Well, it wasn't really required, but then we felt like it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember the Bateman boys. We dug a grave at Mount Olive for the I think it's Vern Bateman's boy, I believe it was.
They got killed in the car wreck.
Killed in the car wreck, him and the
I've
Pettigrew boys.
heard my uncle talk about that.
Yeah.
Bad wreck on old 66.
Up there on,
Yeah.
come around the corner
Yeah.
to the side of Buena Vista.
Yeah. Yeah.
And lost control of a car at a high speed.
Yeah.
And killed about 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
Seemed like 5 of them. Maybe.
Yeah. I remember hearing them talk about it. That was in the 50s, I guess.
Yes. And
So
then after that, working for, well, then Marvin Smith come by one day, and I wasn't doing anything. This was kind of, I guess people quit dying for a little while. I don't know what happened.
well, they go into those little spurts when they don't.
But it seemed like it did go into
Yeah.
3. It seemed like when you had one, you could about bet on it's going to be 3
Yeah.
funerals.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then Marvin Smith come by one day, and he sold wood. Back in that day and time, about every home had a wood stove in it,
Mm-hmm.
and that was one of the main heating fuels that we had.
Mm-hmm.
And Marvin said, I need somebody to split wood. He'd pay me $1 an hour, $8 a day, if I'd split wood. So I took him up on that whole winter. I split wood every day. Got pretty good at it. You get where when you split wood every day, you get where you can read that stick of wood pretty good. And then I'd help him haul it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was looking for a better job. I've been to Springfield, and I was putting in applications, different places in Springfield, trying to see if it was hard, and they wasn't. And that's when I came back to Webster Electric. And I still, to this day, I believe a lot of times that the good Lord just looks out for you, for dummies like me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I went in there, and Hugh Bennett was the general manager, and he was at the counter up there at the old building. I asked him about an application. He said, well, I'm not taking any applications. We don't have any openings. Okay, I thanked him and turned around and started to walk out. And down the old hallway there, down by the water fountain, was a gentleman who I'd never seen before. His name was Ray Castle. He was the line foreman. And he was standing there and motioned at me to come down there. So I walked down there, and he motioned at me to come on into his office. And I went in there, and he said, "Oh, I heard you asked about a job." And I said, "Yes, sir, but I understand you don't have one." He said, "Well, I can probably handle that part." He said, "What do you know about electricity?" I said, "Nothing, sir." And I didn't. He said, "Are you afraid of heights?" I said, "No, sir, I'm not afraid of heights." He said, "You know you're not?" I said, "I know I'm not." He wanted to know where I ranked at in my class. And I told him about where I was. I think I was we had about 40 some students in my in my senior class. I think I ranked 7th or 8th, and I wasn't real smart, but
that's pretty good though.
I might not have been the dumbest one either.
Yeah, yeah.
He said, "If you'll be here Monday morning, start to work, I'll start you $1 an hour." I said, "Sure, I'll be here."
Yeah.
And I was. He said, "If you'll make a good hand in 6 months," yeah, 6 months, he said, "if you'll make a good hand, I'll give you a quarter raise."
That's a pretty big raise. That's,
well,
yeah,
I guess
25%.
I stayed 6 months. Well, I stayed 51 years. I don't know whether I made a good hand.
51 years.
I'm not going to say I made a good hand, but anyway, I stayed anyway.
Well, you ended up being the manager of the co-op.
Well, I wound up the last 7 years being the general manager of the
That's
co-op.
right. That's right.
But, and it was good to me.
Yeah.
I had a good board, had a bunch of employees I'd put them employees up against any bunch of employees in the state.
Yeah, they're still good for sure.
One thing I always told my employees out there, even as a manager, I said, don't forget who owns this place. You don't own it, I don't own it. The members own Webster Electric. Mm-hmm. Don't forget that.
Right. How many employees you reckon there was when you started?
Oh, there was about 20 some of us.
About 20 some.
There wasn't that many on the line.
I was getting ready to say, how many worked outside though?
Outside there was, I could have counted up. There was only 3 linemen.
3 linemen.
Ray Rust, Keith Renner, Arthur Rowland.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started as a apprentice lineman. I'd never been on a pole before in my life. And Ray Rust loaned me his hooks and climbing equipment. Mm-hmm. And that's until I got mine bought. It took a while to get them. And I know that one of the first poles I ever climbed was down on Panther Creek, down north of Fordham. 30-foot pole. I got almost to the top of it before I fell off of it. I burned it and went right. They call burning it. That's when you grab it and slide down it. That's kind of rough. Ooh. You generally lose some hide when you do that.
Yeah, get a few splinters.
So I went back up it again. Done that twice before I finally made it to the top where I needed to be.
Yeah.
And I know Ray Russ come in that night and told Castle, said, "Well, I'm making a lineman out of him." Said he burnt one twice today and said he went right back up. And anyway, I got where I liked to climb. And then we didn't know what a basket truck was back then, what we call now. Mm-hmm. Well, that was just something unheard of. That or a digger truck. My goodness, we dug poles. If they needed to set a pole, we dug the hole by hand with a spoon and spade. Mm. And if you never used one of a spoon and spade, that was one of the most awkwardest things you'd ever had, trying to get that dirt dipped out of that hole 6 foot down in the ground.
Yeah.
Without spilling it all on your spoon deal. But anyway, after you'd done that for a few years, you got where it was just come natural.
Yeah.
But then we finally got a bucket truck. Then we finally got a digger truck. Now we're really we go out there now and you go out there in your front yard here in 30 minutes. Well, no, last time I had a minute and something, you'd have a 6 foot hole dug 6 foot deep, ready to set a pole in it.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, we're in good shape now.
Yeah, it's amazing, but they have to be. I mean, look at the service territory and look at the number of meters and look at the number of customers that you have compared to those.
You said look at things like that. Yeah. I've thought a lot about that. When I went to work at Webster, Lyndall, there was 28. We had 2,800 meters, if I remember correctly.
2,800. Okay.
When I retired, after I've been there 51 years, right. When I retired, we had right at 19,000.
19,000.
So it growed a little bit.
I would say that's amazing.
And still growing.
Yeah. And the amount of power that was used comparative. I mean, just think about that. In '58, you just barely had television. You didn't have air conditioning in homes yet. You didn't have all the usage, electric appliances. You had pretty much gas appliances in those days. And it's just amazing.
Well, I know you mentioned, makes me think back, and you mentioned things that we did have and did not have. We had a contractor on the south end, that big contractor that built a lot of subdivisions down there. And he'd built a subdivision right west of the Logan Elementary School, state of the art subdivision. We put all underground primary lines in it, which is just something unheard of back then. Of course, mainly everything went overhead then.
Right.
And he built houses in there, but they didn't sell. They wouldn't sell them. And I know I was serviceman at that time, traveling all the system, and I asked him one time, I said, what's going on with the houses? He said, well, he said, things are changing. He said, from now on, they're going to have central air put in them. And they didn't put any
They didn't have central air.
No, they didn't have central air back then.
Yeah.
He said, I've never put, but he said, I'm going to have to start putting it in. They said, that's what they're asking for now.
Yeah. That's probably the '70s, I bet.
No, that would have been in the '70s.
Yeah, '70s.
In the early '70s.
Yeah. Because that's about the time Marshfield was building out all these FHA houses and starter homes, and they didn't have central air. A lot of them, they had to have window units, but they might have had They might have had a furnace, but it was propane, or it might have been electric, but didn't have air on it.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then we started putting in at Webster. They started putting in all electric homes. The gold medallion home, they called it.
My dad built one 1970, the split level over on Elm Street.
We set a separate meter for the heat only.
Mm-hmm.
And the rate for the heat meter, the rate for the kilowatt, on the heat meter, was a penny a kilowatt.
Is that right?
Yes. And then on the other would be like 3.5, 4.5 cents a kilowatt. Mm-hmm. But the heat meter would be a penny a kilowatt.
I didn't realize that. Wow.
There's a little story on that. She was a county health nurse,
Hackman, yeah.
They built
Eleanor Fine.
They built a new home out here, and all electric. Mm-hmm. Heat meter had been put in just for the heat.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then they had a meter for the utilities and everything. And well, as the co-op finally done away with that penny a kilowatt rate. And I was member service truck I was running all the time, and Hugh Bennett instructed me to start taking those heat meters out and getting rid of those. And I still remember going out there and I knocked on the door, told them why I was there, if we were going to take. Miss Hackman said, "No, you're not either." I was promised. Yeah. And you had to know her, I think.
Yeah.
She was pretty firm in her. She's going to stay.
Yeah.
She said, "No, you're not either. They promised me that I'd have that forever, and you're going to leave it."
Yeah.
So I called back in on the radio to Mr. Bennett, and I said, "She's told me." I said, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "Just leave it and come on in."
Yeah.
So we left it. It may still be there. I don't know.
I bet it isn't.
I don't think so, but anyway.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I still remember that.
Yeah.
No, she said they promised me whenever we put this all in that I'd have it.
Yeah.
She said, and I want it left there. You leave that. So,
yeah. But it's funny because you mentioned the other meters maybe were 3.5 or 4.5 cents or whatever, but I can remember Webster's rate being like 5.5 cents forever, a long time. Cheapest in the state, pretty much. And it was that way for a long time, years. And then all of a sudden, of course, it just seems like everything else, just like our groceries are today. It just started creeping up every year, a penny or two. But anyway, yeah, that was interesting times because
we was able to hold that rate forever.
Yeah.
And
we had a lot of growth, I'm sure. And
we had a lot of growth, and that was. But now the growth, of course, we was borrowing money to build lines with. And this is one of the things at Webster we had to do. We had what we call a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan. And RUS is where we got our money from, Rural Utility Service in Washington. And sometimes we would get money, we could borrow it real cheap because we'd apply, we'd be what we call a hardship loan because we'd be growing so fast, some of the systems would,
Mhm.
that they were having trouble keeping up with everything. You can't wait till the load's there to build the line. It takes a while to build the line. You gotta try to look ahead of time and get the facilities there to handle the load before it gets there.
Mhm.
And I think the state's running into that a lot now with their highway departments, what I'm beginning, because kind of looks to me like what I'm seeing. I don't know, I'm not a
They're
politician.
they're trying to play catch up, and they're
They're
so far
trying
behind.
to play
It's
catch up.
And that's one of the reasons that the 12.5 cent gas tax went in. I mean, because there's just no way they could ever get
Right.
ahead of it, and the growth that the state is seeing on I-44 and I-70. I mean, it's just unprecedented. I mean, we've got to have three. We got to have three lanes on 44, if nothing else, for safety. For
Yes,
safety, because you're taking your life into your own hands when you get off
it's
the Marshfield
dangerous.
overpass
My
to
wife,
make it to
my
Springfield.
wife used to, she would count the number of semis. We'd be going to Springfield. She'd count the number of semis that we would meet between Marshfield and Springfield,
Mhm.
just as to have something to do.
Yeah.
Maybe take her mind off my driving, I don't know. But anyway, nothing uncommon to run up towards 300 we would meet.
Yeah. Yeah.
One year we was on vacation. We'd been up into Wyoming and Montana, and all the farmers up in there, finally with dry time, they was mowing the medians between the interstates up there, baling the hay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, down here, the state was doing all that. They weren't baling hay, they just brush hogging everything down.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the Optimist Club, and I had Brownie Unsel, who was district manager for the highway department down here, had him down for a program one time, and I asked him, I said, why don't you let, the farmers around here, they could use that hay, and you wouldn't have to.
I actually remember that. I remember when they allowed that.
And he said, well, and I told him, I said, what they're doing up there, and he said, well, let me explain something. Their traffic count per day up in that part of the country on their interstates, most of them, he said, they're less than 10,000 cars or trucks a day.
Mm-hmm.
He said, at that time, this is back in the early 80s, at that time, the traffic count on I-44 out here was 22,000 a day.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we can't do that because of the safety that's concerned in it.
Yeah.
And I can see that.
It'd probably be 100,000 a day now.
Oh, I told him what it'd be today.
But they did. There was a year or two where they had a drought. They let maybe not the interstate, but they let them on state highways.
Yes, they did. I remember that.
Yeah. So let's back up again. That's really interesting stuff. I appreciate that the stories from Webster. We'll talk a little bit more, but I did want to go back to when you and Edwina got married, and then you started your family right out there on farmland, and talk a little bit about your family, your kids, and maybe your grandkids or whatever.
Well, we got married up, and I bought in the first year, the first place. That's where we lived out there. I mean, that's the first place we owned.
You built your house, right?
Yes, I built the house. Mm-hmm. My dad and my dad-in-law and Uncle Fred Roast, they built that house, and Clorin Richardson. They was the carpenters. It's built out of oak. It's vice boxed. All the sides is vice boxed oak. And Uncle Cale Roast, he cut most or sawed most of the lumber, oak lumber. But we moved out there, and we first got engaged, and I was still living at home, but we hadn't got married yet. And a gentleman by the name of Otho Hannah stopped by there one evening, said, I understand you and Edwina got engaged. He said, you're going to get married. Well, yeah, sometime. Well, he said, where are you going to live at? Well, I didn't know. We didn't have no place. He said, me and Alf was his wife. They had family in California, Hannah Trucking. He said, we're going to go to California for about 3 months. We need somebody to move into the farm down here, down on the Old Highway down there towards John Beasley's down in. And he said, just house set. He said, the gas tank, I've got plenty of wood for the winter. The propane tank's full of gas. You will have to go out and milk the old Jersey cow and take care of her. So Edwin and I decided to go ahead and hurry up and get married. So we got married on the 8th day of November. And that's where we moved to. But before Alf and Otho came back from California, the McDowells up here where the quarry is, up here at bottom of Northview Hill, Harry McDowell, Harry and I can't remember what his wife's name was. They had a big house up on that hill right there. It's no longer there, right north of the quarry. They said, we're getting ready to move to Florida, and said, you're needing a place to stay, move up there and take care of this house set for us. So that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And then before they got back, why, I had bought that, we'd bought that 3 acres from Uncle Cale, and we'd started building a house out there. I went to United Savings and Loan, Mountain Grove Savings and Loan, to borrow a little money. I didn't have any money, and I was still making $1 an hour. And anyway, we borrowed enough money, I think $3,500. We built that house, and we didn't have it built or completed, that is. We lacked a lot. We didn't even have the sheetrock up in some of it. But winter was coming on. We were living with my dad and mom. And my mother could be a little bit cantankerous to get along with, and my wife I come in one day from work and she said, well, we're moving. I said, we're moving to our house over there. Well, it's not done. I said, I'm moving. You can stay here if you want to. I'm moving. She did. She moved. I moved too. We didn't even have a well drill. We hauled water.
Oh my.
And back then there wasn't any rotary drills. I don't remember a rotary drill being around back then. This was an old cable rig, jar type rig.
Yeah.
Gentleman from Fair Grove drilled a well 137 feet deep. He finally hit water.
137.
Yeah, 137.
Now my new well that I dug 3 years ago down there is about 550, to show you. They're right in the same vein. So, well, of course, I'm a little higher, but still, that's how much the water table's fallen in
Jim
60 years.
up there right at 500 feet too, right?
Yeah.
Just a half a mile west of me.
Right.
But anyway, and I've drilled another well since then.
I was getting ready to say, you probably had to go deeper.
Yeah, I had to, got the water in the cattle, and it just wasn't supplying the water.
Yeah. That's interesting. So that was, you got married in what year?
58.
58. That's okay. And that's the same year you started Webster then?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's a big year for you.
I started Webster, and I didn't have a week's vacation earned yet. But Ray Castle said, well, since you're getting married, I'll give you a week's vacation. So I took a week's vacation, and we got married.
Yeah.
And then that week there was a little tornado went through Elkland area. And Ray and Castle, the line superintendent, called me, said, you need to come back to work. We've got a lot of lines down. You're going to have to go back to work. So I had to go back to work. But I didn't complain. I went back.
So then in about 2 years, your Lauren came along?
Yeah, about 2 years, and Lauren come along, and that was her first oldest one. And then next was Marla, my daughter, and then Daryl. And Daryl's in his 50s, early 50s. Marla, well, and Lauren, they're both in their 60s.
Yeah, Lauren's about a year behind me, so he's about 64 probably.
Yeah, and then Lauren, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I think he's thinking about Social Security a lot.
Yeah,
now.
yeah, oh yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
I've had a good family.
Yeah.
They got Lauren, a lot of you probably knew Lauren from LNR satellite service.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's still in the satellite business some, although that business is pretty well dried up.
Yeah. Lives down at the lake.
He's down at the lake and he's he's a certified travel agent now.
Oh, okay.
I'm not advertising for him, but then he said that's doing real good. He got his license on that whenever COVID hit. He said, talk about timing, Dad. He said, that was excellent timing. Mm-hmm. It all just shut down whenever COVID.
Yeah.
All movements shut down then.
Yeah, yeah. And then Marla had a long career with Walmart as in the
Marla
in
went
the
to work for
headquarters. I
Walmart,
certainly knew her than those days.
and she enjoyed that. She got to travel with Sam Walton some, and said he's the finest bosses she ever had.
Yep. She was an auditor and did a great job. Those auditors kept
Yeah, she
kept us all
audited.
in line.
She audited for lots of Walmart,
Mm-hmm.
and they own. Then she married Blaze Cook, Koch last name, and then Blaze had started a heating and cooling business when he got out of school, and it was a big heating and cooling, air conditioning and heating in Harrison, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
And Marla, and he needed a bookkeeper. Well, that was right down her line, so they got married, and she took over the bookkeeping job.
Yeah, yeah. And then they ended up with a couple of boys.
They wound up a couple of boys, and then the Blaze sold the company, and but he still worked there some, but he's basically retired now.
Yeah. So Lauren had two children, right?
Lauren had two children, Anthony, Ragsdale, and then Marla, or Ashley.
Yeah.
Ashley is married Arletta Jones, and they live over in Illinois now. He's in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, Daryl, and he married Amy Shedler.
Mm-hmm.
She was a school teacher. And they were on a farm up by Carpenter Shore area. He raises limousine cattle also. And then Amy is retired now, 31 years in the Hartwell, most of the time in Hartwell school system.
And they had two children.
And they had two children.
So all three of your kids had two kids.
Right.
Yeah.
And they never caused any trouble. They was a good bunch.
Yeah, they are a great family. Great family.
They was a good group.
Know them all pretty well.
They didn't keep me up many nights.
Well, I know you're not going to believe this, but it's already 10 till 2. That's how fast this goes. And it's so much fun to hear people's life story and to hear stories from days gone by. So let's go back and talk a little bit more about Webster, because, you know, I guess are you the longest serving employee they ever had?
Yes, as far as I know I am.
I think you probably were.
Yeah.
And you took it, you know, you started in really still the early days. The co-op began in 45.
The co-op started in 1945, and
why don't you tell the audience a little bit about how they started?
A lot of people, younger people nowadays don't understand this, I'm sure, but the reason there was a big need for electricity in the county, the investor owns and the municipal owned generation and electrical companies, they did not want to serve the people out in the county because there wasn't enough revenue per mile line to justify the expense. So there's 12 members. Well, Congress created the Rural Utility Act in 1935, I think it was, where they would loan money to get power to, at low interest, to get power to the rural areas of the county. They've done that to a certain extent, I think, trying to push the internet into the county, into the rural areas.
Some similarities, yeah.
Similar. But anyway, there was 12 members, charter members, met at the courthouse here in Marshfield, and they signed a pact, an agreement deal to start Webster Electric. And I researched that back whenever, Herman Vestal was one of the originals. And if I remember right, they borrowed, starting Webster Electric, $5,000 a note from Webster Electric. That's what it started on. It's grown into a little bit more than that now.
Yeah.
Several million.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But, you know, think about that for just a minute. So the war was just ending.
Just ending.
And all these folks say, how far were people being served with electricity by that time? How far out of town? Just not very far at all.
We lived 5 miles out, and nobody out there.
Nobody had. So just kind of a little bit, and then Show Me Power would have been serving Marshfield, right?
And that was their power was being generated at that time by a generation plant in Mountain Grove, if I remember right,
Is that right?
and which was not efficient.
Yeah. Well, would they have had? They would have been getting a little bit from Tunnel Dam and
Tunnel Dam, but survive a little bit,
yeah,
about 3 kW, we
yeah,
called it,
yeah.
but at the max.
But I mean, just to think
And,
about that, all that whole time and during the Depression and during World War II, most all these rural families didn't have electricity.
No,
You never really thought about
no,
that.
they
You know,
didn't
you,
have electricity.
you think about,
No.
well, they had a radio, they could listen to the news. Well, yeah,
No,
but they had to
on
be battery
They
powered.
had to be
They were
battery.
all battery
Oh,
powered.
yeah.
I mean, people don't
Well,
realize that.
they had to hear Lemon Abner.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, and the
but then,
Grand Ole Opry.
yeah, but then, no, that was not, they wasn't a grid network out there. Now, Alaska, Edwin and I went 3 times. We've been to Alaska, trying to just sightseeing and
Uh-huh.
traveling. They don't have a grid network in Alaska yet to this day like we have in this part of the country.
Is that right? Yeah.
Alaskan Valley Electric Cooperative, their headquarters in Anchorage. They don't have Anchorage, it's the city, it's own municipal. But I was up there and visited them, some of the people there. And they told how many. But they didn't even have any 3-phase line, they didn't need it.
Yeah.
Every little village out there had its own generator. And they would have to get the fuel in there during the summertime because wintertime, the weather gets so bad they couldn't get diesel fuel in there to it. So they'd store the fuel in the summertime in tanks.
It's still that way.
Still, that was in 1996.
96.
I don't know about now.
Yeah,
but
but
in
that's
96
the reason
it
it's
was.
96. Yeah. That's just amazing.
And
So the co-ops, the board got
but
this
they
money and
they got that
yeah,
started building lines,
Mm-hmm.
contracts getting Algar and Martin's. But talking about the generations to show me here, up to that time, up to then, they were going out and buying power from any place they could buy it from. And that was the way with the other systems around.
So in those early days like that, a lot of the towns had put their own systems in,
Yeah.
right? We were lucky here. We were unique
Right.
because we had Show Me Power, which was set up to be a wholesale supplier. I don't know if they were selling it wholesale
Well,
yet or not. But
I remember Hugh Bennett, whenever I was working at Webster, come in there one day, he'd been to a board meeting, statewide meeting. They came in there, and I still remember, I didn't know what he meant by it, but I remember what he said. He looked at me and he said, well, we've done it, whether it's right or wrong, we've done it. And I said, what have you done? But it didn't mean anything to me.
right.
He said, we've signed a pact to form Associated Electric. Well, Associated Electric is owned by all the co-ops in the state of Missouri.
Yeah.
And Associated has the big generation plant at Thomas Hill and also the one down in New Madrid.
Right.
That's where all the power, and that's also they control about 19 dams through the Southwest Power Administration, where they get the power and we get it cheaply. And I know when Enron was going good, and you probably remember talk about a lot of
Oh yeah.
Enron, how Jim Jura, who was the general manager at Associated, he said, and Enron was selling power to different big companies and things, guaranteeing they sell power at such and such price. Jura said they can't do that. He said, I know they can't do it. He said, they're going to go broke.
Mm-hmm.
He said, they can't do it. He said, I know what it takes to generate power. He said, I know that. And he did know it.
Yeah.
He said, they won't survive.
Yeah.
He said, they failed.
They didn't.
And Kenneth Lay, I think, last I'd heard one time
I think he was in prison. Yeah.
in prison.
Fraud and everything
fraud.
else.
They had a tier deal going on where, okay, this company would buy such and over here at a inflated price.
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever they got in trouble, well, then they would they'd form another company and they'd do the
Ponzi
same.
scheme, wasn't it? It's kind of a
Yeah.
Ponzi scheme. Yeah.
Right, same thing. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, Marshfield has been in Webster County, and this area has just been really, really blessed to have a co-op like Webster and to have Show Me Power and the jobs they provide, the service they provide, everything that they do. And quite frankly, Philip, you were there, a big part of that during all those growth years. I mean, from 58 when you started till what did you retire in 08, 09, something like that?
It's
2009,
hard, 2001.
2001. But all that time, just look at the growth that this.
We had a lot of growth. Uh, oh, I was trying to think what percentage it was. I can't remember now. At that time, we'd look at things. I know we'd sit down and look. We'd sit down with an engineering firm and we'd go through where our growth was in our system. Okay, we've got to do something in this area because there was a program developed there where we could look at how much electricity is being demanded in this area. We got the lines in that to supply that.
Yeah.
So might have a big building deal to heavy up the lines or to increase the voltage. We might go from 7,200 volts to 14,400 volts on our line voltage. But anyway, there's something that we had to constantly look at.
Yeah.
Well, I can remember whenever I first worked here, we thought we could take a 25 kVA transformer. You could serve anything in the world on that 25. Now, by the time I retired, a 50 kVA transformer, twice that big, might be required to handle the load.
Yeah, just a house.
At a residential home.
It's just a house, yeah.
Just a house, at a residential home.
Well,
just because of the growth.
Yeah, well, look at the homes. I mean, when you think about it, I mean,
Well,
a lot of people don't think about computers, but when the computer industry started,
and it's when's it turned off?
Yeah, exactly. It's like until around 2000, well, mid 90s, we didn't have a computer in our home until the mid 90s.
No, we didn't either.
And we might have had 2 TVs. Well, now there's a TV. Oh, and in our home,
yeah,
I'm embarrassed to say,
yeah, right.
Probably 6 or 8. Yeah. You know, every bedroom's got one, and
I've got
the family room. And
I've got 3.
Yeah,
plus a satellite.
Yeah, and then computer-wise, I mean, it's just same.
Computer,
we plug.
We
plug these in every night. How much power do they use? I mean, compared to.
You think, well, that don't make much. I used to make a lot of calls when I was a serviceman on if you had a high bill, go out to your place to see.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things we run into when they first came out with water beds.
Yeah. Those heaters.
Oh, they'd put a heater in that water bed, and then the next thing, and I remember this so very well. His last name was Brooks, an old gentleman down on the south end, down in Greene County, just on the edge of Christian County. His bill had jumped 200 or 300 kilowatts, something like that. And he'd complain about it. Well, I went down to see what was going on, and I said, "What have you done differently?" Nothing. Haven't done nothing differently. And they hadn't added on to the house. They hadn't done anything. There's no reason for that bill. He said meters went bad out there as well. So I tested the meter. I could test the meter. We had a meter test deal.
Yeah.
Meter was okay. Kept sitting there talking with him. We did change the refrigerator, he said. What'd you do? Well, we went to a no frost refrigerator. Had a heating element in there that heated up every time I cycled. Melt the frost off that freezer cycle, off the cold.
Yeah.
So I took and set a separate meter just on that refrigerator. That's where his usage jumped up at.
That's where it was.
He said, "We'll get rid of that thing." So anyway, yeah, you just start in thinking about what you've got at, and how many night lights you got.
Yeah. I don't know, but yeah, more than one, that's for sure.
You probably go by my place there once in a while and see that garage light on still out there at night.
Yeah.
And I forgot to turn it off.
Yeah.
And the dog didn't remind me.
Right. Well, it's amazing. You had an amazing career. You've had a wonderful life, great family, great wife.
I've thought about just what you were saying there.
Yeah.
The good Lord has really been good to me, and
yeah.
There's many times, and I was thinking, well, if he hadn't been watching over me, somebody would. I think I even had his angels nervous too.
Yeah. Well, we've all had those moments.
But I've had we were very lucky at my time at Webster.
Yeah.
Never got anybody electrocuted.
Yeah.
And that was something that a lot of systems cannot say that.
Right. Yeah.
That's something when you make contact with 7,200 volts. Generally, there is. Yeah. Rick Rush went to work at Webster, and then he went to Southwest Electric. Rick was a good lineman. but he made a mistake one time. They made a mistake over there, and they failed to kill a lion out, and he thought it was dead. He took a hold of it, killed him.
Yeah.
So I can't complain about.
Right.
And we are very fortunate here in this. Just think about, we're fortunate that we live in this country where we live in right now, that we can do. I drink coffee with boys at Sheila's about every weekday morning, and a lot of countries we discuss and solve all the problems in the world. Don't solve nothing, but we think we do.
Right.
A lot of countries we couldn't do that.
That's right.
We'd be censored.
Wouldn't be allowed. That's
Wouldn't
right.
be allowed, and we'd be in jail.
No, you're exactly right. We are blessed. We're blessed to be from this part of the country, this part of the world, and this part of the state, Missouri. I mean, everything you look at. And but I can tell you, my perception or what I observe with you is, you and Edwina, you kept the Lord centered in your mind.
Well, I still go to church regularly.
That's what I mean. And
she was a good Christian lady.
Yes, yes.
And I still remember what she told me right before she passed on. I'd been out to Marshfield Care Center, and I got ready to leave. I said, "Mom, are you all right tonight?" She said, "No, I'm not all right."
Yeah.
I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Well," and I knew she wasn't doing real good. She knew she wasn't either.
Sure.
And she said, "I'm not afraid if I don't make it." But she said, I said, "What are you afraid?" She said, "I'm afraid for you. You're going to be here by yourself."
Yeah.
And she said, you like to talk to people." And I said, "Well, I'll be fine." But she was a good Christian lady, and she had faith.
Yeah. That's what I think that's probably what.
And she felt that way too.
Right.
She believed in the good Lord.
You're right. Right. Well, it's evident in the way that you all have lived your lives and the life, the rewards that you've got. So
she wouldn't allow. There wasn't going to be no alcohol except rubbing alcohol in our home. And my kids was really good about that.
Yeah.
I remember, I tell this on Daryl, when he became, one of the girls, I'm not for sure whether it's Amy or his wife now or not, but he was going with, and they said something about, he always had a gun with him. He said, "Let me explain something." He said, I like guns, and he does like guns, and he has, he's a good shot. He killed a lot of cows when he had them sheep up there and all. But he said, "I don't smoke, I don't drink, so don't be complaining about me having my gun, money on gun."
That's right. Yeah, that's his hobby. Yeah.
And
well,
my wife, every night when the kid, it didn't matter if Daryl, Marla, Lauren, when they come in at night, it was a standing rule. They had to come and tell Mom that they was home.
Yep.
And
my boys do that too. Or used to. I don't know. They may not anymore, but they used to. Well, listen. It's 2:05. Our time is up.
Maybe we ought to shut up.
I think we've had a great visit. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your service to our community. You served all those years keeping the lights on forever for all of us, and in bad weather and good weather and every time. And
the worst thing in the world was ice storms.
Yeah.
That was bad.
I know it was bad, and it still is for the guys and gals.
It still would be.
Yeah. But you won the race, and we appreciate your service and appreciate your time here, and we'll hope to see you again. We might have you on again. I've been thinking about having some of you folks that I've had on. Maybe some of you that have lived, in the middle part of the century that we didn't get to hear some more stories. Maybe together we could collaborate and have some fun times. Tom Farr Jr. and Doc Todd and some of them that I've had on here, Pat Abbott, and love to have you together, and we could have a fun time talking about the good old days in Marshfield, Missouri, and at Marshfield High School.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
We'll see y'all next week. I have a guest already lined up, so be sure and tune in next week. You'll enjoy that session as well.